Hi friends, welcome. I'm Chess. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a relationship coach. I talk a lot about family estrangement. And this video, I'm going to talk about the emotional toll that surrounds estranging from family. So not just the estrangement itself, but all of the emotional work that happens prior to estrangement. So I made this video partly from my own experience, but really having talked to so many people who have gone no contact with their families and found the whole experience emotionally exhausting. It's not because they didn't care about their families. It's because they cared too much for too long. And so whilst this won't apply to every single estrangement, there are a lot of adult children especially who are estranging from families because they feel that they've always been doing the heavy emotional work and it hasn't been reciprocated and it's not being done by other family members. This especially applies to scapegoats in narcissistic or other difficult family units, where we are the fixers, the peacemakers, the ones that mold ourselves to try and make everybody else happy. And one of the things is that when we are in the scapegoat role, often we know how to fix the family estrangement. It's not that it's a mystery and we don't know how we can resolve it. It's that we are done doing all the work that is always expected of us to try and make the problems go away. We're not going to do it this time. And so I want to talk through that. So let's go back to estrangement for a second. Estrangement is not somebody's first choice. It is not something that anybody chooses lightly. It's a decision that's made often after years and years, potentially decades of difficult relationships. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of emotional processing, there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of heartache behind it when we have to walk away from such important, integral relationships in our lives. And so estrangement pushes us to our emotional limits. For me, way beyond, actually, beyond anything that I ever thought I was ever going to have to deal with and ever wanted to deal with. So the point is that we don't estrange unless we've got incredibly compelling reasons. And it comes after trying every other idea out. We try to communicate. We try to resolve problems. We often try and put our needs aside and say, okay, I'll be who they want me to be. I will just try and do things their way. I will try and fit into that mold because I don't want to estrange and I can see the writing on the wall. But at some point that just gets too much. We can't keep doing it forever. And we have to make that really difficult decision to estrange. So what happens? What is that trigger for estrangement? I think sometimes we know, sometimes we really don't know. It could be a specific new event, a hurt or a betrayal, or it might be that ongoing problems keep going unresolved and we can't do them anymore. We can't, and we try to address it in the moment later on. We try to have these difficult conversations, but when we can't resolve it, that's when a really deep pain comes in, and that can almost be harder than the pain of what's actually happening, the harm that's being done. The deeper pain is a frustration of not being heard, but it's also a really hard acknowledgement to think that people who supposedly love us and say that they love us, say how much they care about us, aren't listening and aren't willing to change or to even look at situations, even acknowledge what's happening, to try and just ease things a little bit, to try and make things better. And that's one of the most frustrating things about estrangement, and that's another thing that again weighs on us emotionally, that these situations could be resolved so quickly and so simply. We are looking for an acknowledgement of what's happening, some kind of recognition that the dynamics aren't okay and that harm is being done and that it's not something that we can keep going with, and we're actually getting to that point of having to think about breaking a sacred bond. That's an incredibly hard thing to go through. If there was any other way, if there was any kind of recognition, let alone just a little bit of acknowledgement and support, then we would be able to work through it. But again, that doesn't happen. That's why we get to this estrangement point. And it's not because our parents or our families are flawed. It's not that. Everybody's flawed. We get that. We understand that. The problem is that the flaws are actually more than just flaws. They are harming us. And again, it's this lack of recognition and wanting to address and to change what's going on. The dynamic continues. And when the other person or the other people can't acknowledge what's happening and that it is causing us problems, then we have to hold it all on our own shoulders when it's not our stuff to hold. And often we hold it alone. And it just keeps adding to that emotional weight that we're carrying. But because these relationships are so important, they're so integral to our lives, that often we stay in these relationships for a lot longer than really is healthy for us. But the emotional gymnastics required to stay are also incredibly hard, because we don't want to admit that the relationships we're in are so harmful. We try and come up with other ideas or other reasons to try and explain what's happening. We can almost tie ourselves up in knots trying to make excuses and have other reasons, rather than look at really what the reality is, that the people who supposedly are saying that they care about us and should care about us are at the same time harming us. And we can also get caught in this idea of, well, do they mean it? Is this actually their intention? And really, most of the time, we do love those people who are harming us as well. So it's a really complicated place, because we're trying to understand, we're trying to figure out their perspective, we're maybe trying to put ourselves in their shoes, and then we want to feel our pain as well. And it's like being a contortionist in our heads and in our hearts to try and understand how this can possibly be happening. But we can do this for a while. We can work in this space of doing all this emotional juggling. We can do that if we need to when we're children, when it's a survival technique, or potentially for a while when we're adults as well. But for a lot of us, when we get to a point where we actually have choices in our lives and we realize that we don't rely on our families for survival, we start to think about whether we want to be holding all this weight anymore and whether we can. Things can start to break down. Our mental and physical health can break down, or we can just realize that we're putting so much energy into these relationships that we're not getting back. And so it can get to the point that we realize that it's unsustainable and we can't keep doing it. And then we have to make tough choices, and for some of us, that means leaving. And that leaving part, that actual estrangement, that takes a lot of emotional labor too. For the family or the parents, it's almost like coming out of the blue and this sudden event. And they don't see all of the build-up that's come to it. And when the response from the family or the parents is really not helpful, or is attacking the person that leaves, or is not supportive, or the amount of pain that the person is leaving is not acknowledged, then again, that's another hurt and another layer of betrayal, really, that we're not being seen and the situation is not being given the gravity that it truly has. And parents can be absolutely shocked. Well, what happened? Why did that happen? How can that possibly have happened? And it's like, we've already had this conversation. We've gone through this so many times, but you weren't listening. Now maybe because I've said I'm done and I'm closing the door, now you're actually being forced to listen. But it's like, it's just way too little, way too late. And again, it's missing the point. It's missing the key message, which is this relationship is so far from okay. I am going through so much hurt that the hurt of estrangement is going to be preferable than staying in the current dynamic. And so I'm just going to end on a quick message to, if there's a parent out there or a family member who has had someone leave, has had someone estranged from them, I really hope from my heart to yours that you can hear this message and not take it as any kind of insult or pointing the finger. My point around this is to try and help other people so we don't have to go through estrangement, because it hurts so much. But the fact is that we have to look at what's been going on, and we have to be curious. We can't be blaming, we can't be getting angry. We need to be emotionally supportive to the people in our lives and the people who have left. If we want to get them back, we have to be able to consider that they had a good reason, and we need to be open going into the conversations with them to understand what that was, what the problem was, what our role was in that dynamic, what we were doing, and to try and move forwards and make changes so that we can reopen the relationship. Friends, whatever brings you here today, I really wish you well. This is a hard subject, so please take care of yourselves. And I will look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care, and bye for now.